Hi and welcome to the third instalment of National Disability Services webinar series on using the Organisational Readiness Self-Assessment Toolkit. I'm Karen Stace. In this webinar we're looking at the Road to Readiness, which is the graphic that you can see on your screen now. As a sector support consultant working with NDIS, my job is to work with service providers to help prepare them for the introduction of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. In that role, I use the Road to Readiness graphic a lot to tell different stories about the ways in which the future of disability service provision looks different to the past or even current arrangements. You can use it in the same way in your own organisation, or you can use it to stimulate conversations where they haven't begun or aren't well advanced about what that future might look like. A future in which people with a disability, their families and carers, exercise degrees of choice and control in the use of their services which may be completely new. So why is readiness required? In NDIS's view, readiness is required because the new system represents a once-in-a-generation change in the disability service system. The business management processes you have now may work really well for the current system, but leave you ill-prepared for some features of the new world. For providers, one way of thinking about readiness is to understand that your existing funding for disability services is going to change. Your income won't necessarily cease, in fact it may increase, but it will come to you as a payment on delivery of a service or support rather than via block funding arrangements. Further, you will be paid in arrears or on delivery of a service rather than in advance. This requires you to have systems that allow you to track the precise quantities of service delivered to your clients and to be able to claim or invoice for those in a timely way. The Road to Readiness suggests that we are all headed for a common destination, which is the marketplace for disability services, where people with a disability will have considerable scope and choice and control over which supports they receive. Secondly, it highlights that, as with most destinations, there are a number of ways in which people can get to the same place. For the purposes of discussions using the Road to Readiness, the two principal roadways are those used by people with a disability, their families and carers on the one hand, and the roadway used by providers on the other. As you can see, the destination is the marketplace, in which people with a disability exercise choice and control over the supports that they use, in the same way that people without a disability may take for granted. Look at it in this picture. Your organisation is there. So are some of the other specialist disability service providers who may operate in your community. Some may already offer similar supports to the ones you offer, and some may have traditionally offered services which are different from yours. But they may now be considering changing their service offerings in ways that bring them more directly into competition with you. So may some of the big-name charitable organisations, whose branding we often see on buildings and fundraising appeals from time to time. But if you have a little bit more of a closer look at the picture, you'll see that there may also be mainstream services that we all use ourselves. The local gym, for example, or the council's cultural centre, the library, or for-profit businesses. They may have heard about the National Disability Insurance Scheme and started to think, why can't we provide services to people with a disability? They may also be present in the marketplace already. As I said, for the purposes of this story, there are two main roads to this destination. One is taken by people with a disability who are called participants in the new system, the other by providers. For people with a disability, the road to the National Disability Insurance Scheme begins with the eligibility and assessment process. For most recipients of existing disability services, this process will be reasonably straightforward. However, it raises the possibility that people may be actively involved, some for the first time in their lives, in imagining and designing the mix of services required to allow them to realise their goals and aspirations. So how does it do this? Once eligibility is established, participants are engaged in a conversation with an employee at the National Disability Insurance Agency called a planner. This conversation will be focused on what the participant wants to do with their life or what they think a good life looks like. It will identify all of the supports that the person currently receives from their families and elsewhere in the community. It will also identify those reasonable and necessary supports required from the scheme to help the participant achieve those goals and aspirations. This process and the expanded role for participant choice and control will have consequences for service providers. One such issue you might need to consider is the number of your current clients who may or may not be eligible for supports under the scheme. What will happen to them, and what will be your capacity to assist them to navigate the road ahead? You will also need to consider what would happen if some of your clients decide to purchase their supports from other providers. Certainly early experience from the trial sites is that most clients are choosing to stay with their existing providers, but we do expect that this will change over time. The impact of such a change is reasonably foreseeable, but does require providers to model what it might mean for your existing operations and for any business models that you have in place that supports those. A reduction of demand would impact on your income and perhaps your capacity to employ staff on their current arrangements. The flip side is that an increase in demand might bring you up against the limits of your existing facilities and mean that you may need to consider expanding your services to new locations at considerable initial expense. For service providers, the road into this marketplace is therefore full of challenges. These include the changing nature of their income, the increasing unpredictability of that income, the number of clients and the diversity of their choices, the challenges associated with recruiting and keeping good staff, and the need for organisations to maximise the percentage of the time that staff spend directly supporting clients, and thus generating revenue, while still accounting for the need to train and support staff in ways which will benefit their clients and maintain a quality service. Many of these considerations do not necessarily relate to the client or NDIS participant experience directly. Instead, they relate to those business management capabilities, processes and practices which providers require to be capable of dealing with the ever-changing market-based environment into which their organisations are moving, particularly with the full rollout of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We have grouped these processes and practices into 7 operational domains that all businesses have in common. These are strategy, governance, clients and market focus, financial sustainability, people and capability, information and knowledge management, and quality measurement and improvement. In each of these domains there are a range of capabilities which correspond to your ability to deal with some of the challenging issues you will face in a market-based system. The Organisational Readiness Toolkit will take you through this range of capabilities and help you to measure how well, or not so well, you are doing in respect of each. But whether you're talking among yourselves or having discussions with your board, with your staff, or with your existing clients, it will be easy to identify a long list of scenarios that raise questions in your mind about your organisation's ability to function and thrive in the new world. The Road to Readiness graphic, the 7 key questions, and the self-assessment checklists are tools that will help you to identify the capabilities you require and to map the gap between where you are now and where you'll need to be under an NDIS. In the next webinar, we're going to look more closely at some of the key questions that might drive your organisation's thinking in the directions it needs to be headed for NDIS readiness. Hopefully some of these questions will have already come up for you in considering the road to readiness. And as you consider your organisation's answers to those questions, you're already starting to build the kind of capabilities you will need to survive and thrive under the NDIS.